I'm Annalisa Giacchi. I'm from the EUSALP Communication staff. First of all, thank you very much to all of you for joining this seminar, which is focused and dedicated to the EUSALP Communication strategy. We choose to talk about that because in the last 6 months, we carried out together with the EUSALP stakeholders and also with the DG Regio consultants, and one of them, Charlie Jourdan, is with us today. They will be our teacher. So we carried out with the support of DG consultants quite a lot detailed discussion on how to improve the EUSALP communication strategy, starting from what we want to communicate, to whom we want to communicate, and through which channels. And I must say that we also met several times in Brussels, in Slovenia, in Carinthia, and maybe some of you were also in Isola, where we share with other colleagues from other macro-regional strategies opportunities and problems linked to the communication. But at the end, all this discussion led to a final communication seminar, which was held in Innsbruck, and where the executive board members were involved. And at the end of this seminar, a final document was produced by Charlie Jourdan and all the DG Regio. And this document is somehow the new, the revised communication strategy of EUSALP. And this document will be officially approved in February in Milan in the next executive board. So today, we want to talk about that with you, and we want to present the main contents of this strategy in terms of mission, in terms of vision, targets, and key communication messages. The seminar will describe the main target audiences of EUSALP, and we'll try to give you some concrete suggestions and inputs of how to reach each single target's audiences through specific tools. In the last part of the webinar, we would like also to say something about the management of how to manage the complexity of macro-regional strategy, explaining which could be the role of each actor and stakeholder involved. So I'm going to say something about that together with Charlie. Maybe all of you know Charlie Jourdan. Charlie is a creative consultant, as he defines himself, and he has got a strong experience in how to communicate public administration work in an innovative and effective way. So I think it's the right person to talk about that today. Before starting, I would like to just remind you a few easy rules to be taken into account during the seminar. During the session, all microphones will be disabled. Only the teacher will be able to talk using the screen sharing option. So you can see easily the presentation on your screen. For question and answers or for any technical problem, you can use the chat window on your right, or you can use the raise your hand button on your right. So to make a question or to talk, please press one of these buttons or write the message on the chat, and Charlie will give you the word. I'm finished for now, so I hope you find this session interesting and enjoy the training. Charlie, it's up to you now.
My name is Charlie. I've met probably most of you already in different setups. We've seen each other, I think the first time a year ago at EUSALP in Innsbruck, before when the presidency started. Then we ran a couple of chats of workshops of different things. And my job today is to explain a little bit more the work we've done with the executive board meeting in October, so you understand why we decided to direct the strategy of communication in a certain direction. A strategy of communication, for people who might not be used to that particular term, is the long-term plan you have over 2, 3, or 4 years in terms of communication, so that whatever message you have reach the correct people. So a strategy is like a battle plan in a war, and that's all produced in order to win the war. So there are many tools, there are many battles to lead, and each battle has its own smaller plan. If you take any war, and I use the word war because communication is a sort of war to win attention. You have many battles, you can win some, you can lose some, but in the end, what you want is to have a 3 or 4 year results where you win the war. The webinar on communication, in that case, will start with why we do this. That's going to be my job to explain why we are actually building this communication strategy, how we can use that maximum and where it starts from. And then in the second part, I will describe a number of tools which are extremely useful and powerful to make that happen. I decided to show you a number of exercises we've run with the executive board, because that's probably where everything is decided in terms of priorities. They have a bigger picture on all the things that we can do, even if the job is done by the action groups and people in different organizations that are related to our job. So I'm going to show you what we've done, and it all started with comparing the 4 macro region strategies, because I needed to have an overview of what everyone is doing in this field all around Europe and see where EUSALP is actually positioned itself. So what I've done is compile a number of data, and EUSALP is particular in its way of functioning, because you're involving regions, which is the level that the other macro region strategy do not have. They usually stick to the country level. So in your case, it's more complex to handle such a macro regional strategy, but it's also more powerful because you can accumulate the power of each administration at the regional level. The second thing I've seen is, and wanted to analyze, is the website performance. So the website performance, at first, when I started to get some results about that, I couldn't get the answer for the Danube region strategy and for the Adriatic one. And the reason is that because their website metrics were not at the time very much available. So we made a work to do that, and I will show you what are the numbers now. But just for you to know, EUSALP, which is the youngest strategy, already had almost 20,000 visitors per year on the website, which means it is very much performing. If you compare it with the Baltic one, which is much older, they only have 23,000 people who visit the website every year. So what we have with EUSALP is already a measure of success of that particular strategy. I'm going to cut my webcam, just keep my screen open. So after a while, when I got more access to the right data for the Danube and for the Adriatic, what I've seen is that they have about 20,000 visitors for the Danube, about 12,000 per year for the Adriatic. The reason it's a multiplication, because since I could only analyze 2 months of data, they had to reinitialize their metrics, you get more or less that. The second big data is the number of people who come back on the website. So you've been visiting it once and you want to know what happens again and follow this particular strategy, then you get the percentage of recurring visitors. What is more important for me is the time they spend on the website. So you see that EUSALP have people staying more than 4 minutes on the website. You have to know that the benchmark in the industry is less than 1 minute. So people tend to stay 4 times more, which means they are very interested in what we say and they want to absorb a lot of content. That's a very good proof of success already, that your strategy is interesting for people and they want to continue absorbing content. Compared to, for instance, Baltic, that has about 2 minutes, you are in the top tier. Can you all hear me? I hear a microphone open, but that's all fine. Then we have a small comparison on social medias and the main channels open, Facebook being one of them, which is mostly exploited by the Danube at the moment. EUSALP has a pretty average number of fans, 800 on Facebook, which tells me that's probably not the channel which is the most used by the audiences that wants to participate into EUSALP. So they won't be very active on Facebook, and the fans are not very much present. If you compare that with the 20,000 visits per year. To finish, we have a number of other metrics. Most probably the one important for me now is the newsletter. So if you look at the bottom of the table, the newsletter is the number of people who subscribe to the newsletter. If you see Baltic, we have 3,000 people who subscribe to the newsletter, who ask proactively to receive news from this macro region, while EUSALP has 3 times more people, 9,000 people. So we have 9,000 people who very much want to receive news from us. At the time I collected this data, it's probably changed, but we had 4 times a year Baltic was publishing a newsletter, while the other microregions were about 2 times a year. It can change, obviously. What is interesting to know about newsletters, it's not about the number of people you reach, but the number of people who open the newsletter. And if you look at EUSBSR, they have about 13% of people who open the newsletter. What does it mean? Is that over 3,000 people, only 430 readers of the newsletter finally get to open, read, and consume this news, which is pretty low if you consider that the industry average is around 20%. Now, what we see for EUSALP is, on the contrary, we have now 9,000 people who register to the newsletter, 40% of people who open the newsletter, which means about 3,000 plus readers each time you send a newsletter. That is very good. That's the double of what the industry sees in general for any website. So people want to receive a newsletter, they consume it, which means for me as a strategist, this is a good channel that we could continue using, and we can certainly invest even more into this particular channel. I will not cover everything, but so that you know, we also analyze the budget of each communication macro region, and you're pretty good. You don't have the best budget for sure, but you use it really well already. For a small message, Adriatic is currently the one that use the best its budget, because its budget is pretty low, and they are doing an amazing job with that. So congrats to our friends from Adriatic. The whole table will be made available to you if you'd like to check. Another thing I always measure is what sort of news we see that are published by us and then spread all around the world. And in this case, it's only digital type of news. And we see that these are the most performing articles in the last years. And we see that most of them will be shared a little bit on Facebook, but they still exist somewhere. These are the articles we wrote or someone else wrote for us. And we see that we have Provincia Trento, we have all these people who talked about us, which is quite interesting for the work of the action groups to know who would eventually carry forward their news to someone else. So all this analysis, as I said, is what I presented to the board, executive board in October, as well as some short comparison of how can we find you. You're the EUSALP macro region, so most people would probably look first on Google to know what you're doing. And at the time, what I said is that you probably communicate in a way which doesn't help a lot of people who do not know you well already to contact and understand what you do. But this is not only EUSALP, these are all the macro region strategy. So let's look at, for instance, Adriatic, because that's the first one. The description you would see is website is dedicated to the EU strategy for the Adriatic Union region. The website is managed by the Government Office of the Republic of Slovenia. If you were to look for information on Google, I guess this wouldn't be the thing that persuades you to click and go on to the next page. But we see the exact same thing for all the macro region. This website addresses the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, EUSBSR. The main information to be found relates to priority areas and horizontal actions. Imagine a little bit that you're going on to an organization like, I don't know, Greenpeace or WWF, and the first thing you see is a description of the way they are structured internally. That wouldn't help you. You wouldn't care very much that Greenpeace has 10 board members and a different structure internally than most companies. That is not interesting for people. What is interesting for people is to know what you're doing. And that is what I will point out in the strategy mostly, is that you mostly communicate for yourself to understand what you do yourself. And when we need to expose what we do to external audiences, these people do not know us yet. And most often they don't care about how we are structured internally. Don't really care if you have an executive board or if you have a presidency's meeting, because this is your internal cuisine. This is not the sort of things people want to know. People want to know what is there in their website or in your action for them. So when we see the EUSALP one, it's probably one that is slightly more already onto the topic. The EU strategy for the Alpine region aims at ensuring mutually beneficial interaction between the mountain regions and the surrounding. So already we have something which is a little bit more targeting other people. And you see that the main thing Google extracts from your website are the action groups. So action group 5, action group 8, which is okay to have action group as a name, but at the same time, people won't really much understand that action group is actually something that benefits them, that benefits you mostly in terms of your internal structure. But what we want is that people who are interested in environment know this is the action group to go there, or if they are interested in transport and connectivity, another action group. So all these things in strategy of communication we have to take into account. We are talking to other people, and people have special needs. The conclusion for this analysis that I brought to the executive board was EUSALP is not bad at all. You're actually second among the 4 macro regions in terms of traffic, so that's pretty good. And in terms of return on investment, you're second, which means you use well your budget of communication and you have a good impact for the money you have. The problem is that the others are not very good either. So I always tend to say in these meetings, you're whether in League 1, League 2, or League 3 in football. And in this case, I would say that all of you are in Division 3 at the moment in football, which is for me an interesting point to stress, because you are among the richest regions in Europe. So in the sense, you can't just stay in Division 3. You have to go in Division 1. And I think that's something the executive board started to understand when we met in October. We need to make efforts in communication so that we can pretend to actually show we are the richest regions in Europe and we do something incredible with that power we have behind us. Some more details I will cover afterwards, and that's pretty much it for what I've introduced to the board meeting before running the next exercise. The next exercise we've done were on audiences, and this is where we are getting into the core topic of that particular chapter, but you know now it comes from something. In order to select audiences, and because I was talking to the executive board, I needed to have a list of audiences that might be interested for them. And which one should we actually put emphasis on? So I've listed, and I've complemented with them, a number of audiences we should reach. The first sort of big block of audiences is the one related to institutions and governments. You will see there are 3 blocks. The 3 blocks are institutions and governments. They are actual individuals, so citizens, how you like to call them. And the other one are stakeholders and businesses and civil society. So you will see there are 3 blocks. The first block, institutional and government. I listed the European Commission, the General Assembly, Executive Board, Presidencies, national coordinators. You can read that with me. And I asked people to vote. So we could extract from that list the most important audiences for our strategy. So let's have a look at the vote. So the vote happened, people were just deciding by themselves which one was the most important. And that gave us the priority audiences. In the subgroup of institutional and government, we have now the European Commission, Committee of the Region, European Parliament, basically the EU institutions. These are priority audiences for the macro region strategy. Then we have the regional authorities. You obviously have 48 regions, which makes it very important to communicate well to your various governments so that they can relay that communication afterwards as well. We have the action groups. The action groups are an audience as well, because we don't consider only the people who work together, but as well all the stakeholders you have. We have local authorities, and then the General Assembly, the Executive Board, and national authorities. So if you look at that particular list, we see that the 3 main audiences we have in terms of governments are the EU institutions, the regional authorities, and the action groups, and their links in terms of technical action. So what we want to avoid now is to communicate on non-priority audiences. So what we want with this particular listing is to stop trying to invest money, time, and effort in talking to the presidencies, because they already know everything exists, the national coordinators, same thing, because they are very much involved, observers in general, because they might be touched by some other channels and other tools, other Alps governance structure, because they are already touched a lot by the action groups and they already follow what you're doing, and other EU macro-regional strategies, which are also very much focused on what they are doing themselves and want very much use or carry forward what we do ourselves at the EUSALP level. What we want to do in a strategy, and that's, as I said, like leading battles or leading a war, is do not focus on things which are not important and put all our effort on the things that we can win and that we should win. Priority audiences, this is what it means. Having a priority means you have to discard things which are not a priority. I did the same exercise for a second block of audiences, which were civil society and business. And in that case, trade associations, private organizations, educational and research institutions. So we listed a great number of them, journalists being one of them, and people voted as well. And so their votes translated into priority audiences are civil society organization linked to policy areas, which means very, very strongly associated with the work we are already doing at the action group level. Then sector-specific business organizations, they are also very much interested in what you're doing at the action group level. Local journalists, because we considered that other journalists wouldn't be interested by the macro region unless first we started with things that we had already in the region, and these are local journalists. Finally, press agencies. For the people who are a little bit less knowledgeable about press agencies, we have these sort of companies who generate a big volume of press and news articles and spread them to other journalists who do not take the time to investigate, create an article, visit something. So press agencies, they share that a lot. I think in Italy, the press agency is called ANSA, and they would feed probably 2,000 or 3,000 different newspapers at different levels. So that's important for us to have them. And the same thing than before. Then we have non-priority audiences, people we don't want to talk to, like trade associations and trade unions, because they're probably covered by other things and might not be worth our investment. Educational and research institutions, because they're already associated. Public agencies, journalists at the national level, individual experts and consultants, and international organizations. What you have to understand is that the executive board decided to put more emphasis on priority audiences because they believe that by putting the emphasis on these ones, we will generate much more attention than if we spread thin on too many audiences. So always start to think, if I put my effort on the priority, what can I get that avoids a lot of pain afterwards? Finally, individuals. Same thing, people living in the 48 regions, people living in one of the 7 countries, people living in local areas, future project leaders, votes again, priority audience that came back from that, the people living in one of the 48 regions, because they have to know that their region is involved somehow into this larger macro-regional strategy. They have to believe that is important. Users of a project, that is something that tend to be very much forgotten, and I'm working a lot with DG Regio, by people who work on a project. When you're doing a project for customers, for people who can use it. If you're building a bridge, you want people to take that bridge. If you're building a new service that helps people get very difficult data to get in general on whatever problem you're solving, you want a number of users to use this particular tool. So these are customers of the project. And the main part of communication in general in the world is to focus first on what you're delivering as a service or a product and try to convince a maximum number of people to use that service or product. So these are the people we are talking to. And finally, future project leaders, in the sense that we want them to understand EUSALP criteria. So when they will come up with projects, they will already integrate this dimension of EUSALP. Same thing, non-priority audiences, people living in local areas where a project is, because it's difficult if they're not users of a project to talk to them. They might hear about it by knowing someone who's already a customer. Current project leaders, because they're supposed already to be covered by Interreg somehow. High school students and their teachers, activists in one of the action group topics, entrepreneurs, companies. All these things, all these individuals that might be touched better by a journalist rather than us trying to talk to them directly. So now what we have is a concept of the priority audiences are people we can touch and should invest time and money in touching. The rest might be touched by some other means, but they are not our priority. What does it mean? And I'd like there to use a concrete example. So let's say someone comes with this idea that the Action Group 1 on communication could produce a video for events. That could be the annual forum, for instance. We invest, let's say, 5,000 euros into contracting some people to make video out of the event. I'm going to switch back my camera so you can see me while I talk about that. So let's say I'm making a video of the next event. What happens? Have you been to events in the past? I'm pretty sure you did. Who's watching these sort of videos? Well, all the people who were at the event. The main thing you watch on the video, which is about an event, is to see if your face is in the event, which is great. I mean, it's a great memory. But in the end, what you get is probably 300 people on the view count of this particular video. And for journalists, that's not interesting. If he's not himself at the event, that's not an interesting thing to tell about. Like there was this event that happened where I wasn't, and I watched their commercial video, I'm happy. That doesn't happen. So what you have is that if you invested 5,000 euros of time, of yourself, of service providers, when I'm talking about time, I'm also talking about your salaries, the time of service providers, the money of service providers, you've been going for free or for back and forth to validate that video with everyone involved. What you get for 5,000 euros are 300 views, which means it's about 15 euros per person who watched it. To be honest, in terms of communication, if 15 euros is the cost for someone watching something, it's better to invite him at a restaurant so that you can talk to him for an hour instead of showing him a video of 2 or 3 minutes that he might not even watch until the end. So in terms of strategy, that's a loss of money. Are there any events that would probably be interested to cover in video? That happens a lot. If your event is very important technically and a lot of people can't join, then you make a webinar like we are doing, or you can make a live YouTube event. That's kind of a similar context, but it's only if you know that people who can't attend want to attend and see what's happening. Usually these are technical conversations and people want to know what is really happening. It's very rare that a trailer of an event makes any sense. So now what we have is we have priorities of audiences. If the tool we want to produce is not checking one of these boxes and doesn't make sense for these people, it is better to give up and refocus on other tools. So this is a guide to build your communication without having this doubt, which I believe everyone has. Should I do that? Should I talk to these people? Is it rational? Is it actually a good investment of money and time? Now we have an actual way of doing that. I'd like now to go for 3 or 4 minutes on the analytics of the website of EUSALP. So we have a website. I'd like you to dig a little bit with me because I'm pretty sure that's not something you do regularly if you're not handling the website yourself. So I'm going to visit the analytics of that particular page, and we are going to describe quickly what we see in these analytics. I'm going to cut my webcam because I'm going to focus on my screen right now. So you should normally still hear me, and what I'm going to check is the audience of the website in general. So I'm on the website. First thing, I'm going to cover an entire year of data so that we can understand what happened since the 30th of January and what we have as traffic. So what we have as traffic, you see it's even increased probably during the forum time. You see a lot more users at that particular amount of time period. So we get up to 300 and something people checking the website during the forum or just at the beginning or end of the forum, which means during the year we got up to 24,000 people visiting our website. which means also we have more people, but a little decrease in attention time. That's all fine compared to what I've seen before. That's very good. What is interesting for me is to see where does that traffic come from. And what we see here is that the countries that send the most traffic are Italy. So Italians are usually, you have to know, people who are very, very much present on the internet. And these are this is the largest community on Facebook for the European Parliament as well, for instance. But what I want to see is that compared to the size of countries, Austria is doing great. They were organizing the annual forum, so obviously a lot of people were coming from Austria. But Germany and France bring 11% of the traffic for Germany, 6% for France, which means for me, that's pretty low. I'm French myself. I know that the two regions who work for France are probably among the richest, and they have the second and third largest city in France, but only 1,500 people visit the website every year from France. So there's definitely some gains to be made here in France and in Germany, because I want to optimize this number of people visiting so that we can probably multiply by 1.5 or 2 the traffic on the website over a year or 2. That's the whole objective of that. You will see that Slovenia, for instance, is pretty good. Slovenia is a country of, I'm not sure, but probably 3 million people. That's very good in terms of traffic. Another thing I always check on the websites, the cities are not very important, but that's more for your vanity metrics. If you'd like to check, see if you see your own city in the cohort here. What I want to check is always the behavior of people. Okay, how do they behave on our website? If they come back, if they stay. So in our case, what we see is that we have 80% of people who are new to the website. So each year, it's a new traffic, while 20% of people come back during the year. These people, these 20%, these 5,000 something users, are the people who are fan already. And if you look at the time they spent, the first one is people who discover us for the first time, while people who come back stay 5 minutes. So these people, they really found in the website something important to come back to. Now, there is another measure of behavior, is what are the things people are interested in. And if I check the websites, now the pages that are most visited, what I see, the dashboard, Pitch Project Annual Forum, that was a big driver for traffic. EUSALP EU Strategy Alpine Region. If I was clicking, you could see the detail of this particular page and we could visit it. So if I open it, what we see is the About page, basically, the page that most people would check during a visit the first time. What are you actually doing? So this is a very important page. And I come back. The action group pages. So each action group we can see has its own traffic coming to the website and attract a certain number of people by itself. In fact, we could even dig much more in depth into the website and see that this is what we call a behavior flow. It's a little bit complex the first time you see it, but it's pretty easy to understand. This big box are all the people who arrived on the homepage, transition to another page, and if I click on that, I see which pages they are mostly interested in and how many people drop out of their visit. So they don't go after the actual homepage. So I see that a number of these pages are very important for people. But most importantly, and this is where I want you to understand how we do web, is that most people, they don't open the EUSALP homepage. What they start with is one page they found on Google or that was referred to them somehow on Facebook, for instance, or someone else. So if you look at all the pages that attract most of the traffic, what we see. EUSALP Energy Conference 2018 attracted 632 people over the year. So this particular page, because it's a specific topic and people were interested in that, decided to visit the rest of the website via this webpage. So each time you don't find your own action group there, it means that probably you might need to reformulate a little bit the way you communicate so that you can attract more over time on the website via this particular page. So these things are ways people entered our particular website. And you remember that Pitch Your Forum, that was pretty good. Pitch Your Forum helped us get a lot of this new particular audience, around 3,000 people that entered, checked the Pitch Your Forum, And then what we see is that they continued navigating on the website. So all these things gives you the entire flow of how people visit and the rest. I'm going to stay at that level. I think that's enough. Once again, these are the most important pages for the people who visit our website. That gives us an excellent indication of what people want to know about what we do. Because if they are interested in this particular topic, that means we can bet on that topic and continue producing content there. People are going to come and follow that particular content. So that's it for the EUSALP website and the first part. What I wanted to show is that everything you're going to see afterwards, which is linked to the mission and vision. I'm not going to introduce that now because I think it's not yet either validated or very much of your own discussions to have, because this is like the big message of EUSALP towards probably the Commission mostly. So that's an executive board decision mostly. That will be shared once they all have decided that this is a way we can talk about it. But what I wanted to show you is that the big vision and statement and stuff are interesting for big people when they talk and introduce that what is EUSALP doing. But the actual concrete work of communication goes through all these details, all these small ramifications, all these small pieces that we share, and that attract people over time. Did a number of exercises. The main exercise was to collect these words. So you get big classifications of what EUSALP makes are very different. You are technicians, which means you are different from others because you understand the technicalities of the territories. You build bridges and alliances between people who usually don't talk to each other so that you can make things happen. You're looking ahead in the sense where you're looking in the future of what is going to be transformational for the region, which means you can anticipate problems and you can solve them eventually. Same thing, you spot projects that exist already, and you try to pass them at a political level to scale them. So that's a recognition you give to a project that is already great so that it can be adopted by more actors afterwards. It's kind of laboratory type of innovator stuff. You have a global passion for the Alps. And there were things on how you actually do the job of convincing politicians. What I understood, by the way, is that if there's a big crisis, everyone wants to work together. If there's no crisis, then you need to stimulate people to remember that it's better to be together fast before a catastrophe happens. But so what I did in the process is extract all these things. So all these have not been curated in the sense where I took everything people were telling me. And from there, we started to build a number of vision statements. The work has been done not by me, but by Stoyan Pelko, that you know probably for having him, you've seen him in a couple of other setups. Stoyan has been working with lots of governments in the past. He's working with Slovenia a lot, and so in general, he's controlling very well this big sort of mission statement and vision statements. So he's been doing the work. I extracted the insight, I extracted the words, he compiled them into something that will be presented and shown to everyone soon. But once again, as I said, I'm much more interested in the sub-type of messages than in the big message. For one reason is that if I take we bring the best of each of us in one place. That's a cool thing to say, but it's also something that could be said by a lot of different organizations, not only EUSALP. While probably if you're looking at something that is very specific for you, we are connecting existing projects to the political level, meaning that they can continue to do their work. They are not limited by the time frame of the project. They can scale up. They can bring something to a lot of regions simultaneously. That's much more EUSALP. I remember one conversation I had where someone said, for instance, we need a big slogan for EUSALP, and the big slogan was connecting people. And I made a joke like, hopefully Nokia has been using that for 20 years. So if you look and sound like someone else because you're too vague, it's not because you have a big slogan that's going to work. It's on the contrary because you're specific to what you bring to the world, which is different. And this is where I extracted these things. And now we are building this particular vision that only EUSALP can have and not Nokia. So that's it for this answer, I think. And if you give me the go, I continue on the other presentation. So all this document was sent as part of the executive board meeting. Should I continue? Well, no words, so I take that as a
you can,
go.
Charlie, of course.
Okay, amazing. So tools and channels, what did we have? Basically, from that analysis, executive board, understanding what is behind and seeing all your communication tools, analyzing all of them, we came back onto 4 tools, which are the main priority. So tools, meaning things we can produce so as to share most of our content to the right audiences. Okay, so this is a tool. It's like a hammer. A hammer is great for putting nails in a box. You don't use a screwdriver to put a nail. So that's the logic of it. You use the right tool. The 4 tools we're going to have are first storytelling, but storytelling according to a very specific structure I'm going to share with you. Video case studies, video case stories in that case, because they're backed by storytelling. I will explain what I mean. Flagship project web page. That is something I've been hearing everywhere for the last year is what do we actually do concretely at EUSALP? So whether you are at DigiRegio level or even in the action groups, a lot of people have trouble to express one specific project they've been working on. And it's normal, you don't have that many because of your structure, but some of them are extremely important and represent universally the beauty and the power you've been working on. And finally, the newsletter. I've talked a little bit before about the newsletter. This is one tool. It's mostly a channel in that case, which means it's a way to reach to people. So it's both things at the same time, but we will talk about it. So let me take now the next 20 minutes to explain you a structure of storytelling that will help you in whatever you do. So even if you're not in communication right now producing tools, if you understand the structure of storytelling, you're going to be amazingly successful. Okay, so let's start. The objective of storytelling is to tell a story, usually in less than 3 minutes, and that people understand the problem you're talking about, the solution, and know that that was a great way of doing things. If you think about it, you might be a good storyteller, or maybe you're not a good storyteller. Around you, you have people, when they start speaking, everyone listens to them. And there are people, when they start speaking, no one even cares about them speaking. Why? It's because they adopt, intuitively or not, some storytelling structures. If I'm starting with a problem, like most big stories you see on TV, on cinema, with people around you, they start with a problem. This princess was doing whatever, and she had a problem. Star Wars is about a guy living on a planet with parents, and he wants to escape that planet, so he's very frustrated, and suddenly what happens? He meets a Jedi. So most of stories start with a problem, and this is because they have a problem that we want to follow them. So where does it apply a storytelling structure? In most of cases, and we're talking about storytelling of case studies, which is very specific, we have advertising awards. I will show advertising so you will understand what I mean, that are extremely good at telling stories in less than 3 minutes. You have to understand when you're competing for awards in advertising, you're competing against probably 2,000 or 3,000 people at the same time. So when I go to advertising awards myself, I know that the jury members would see 80 stories of advertising that took place in the world. Usually it's campaigns that touch multiple countries that try to pass a big message. We'll see some examples, and that are very complex to understand, probably much more complex sometimes than some of your projects, but they managed to tell that story in less than 3 minutes. So one day I woke up thinking, like, why don't we use the exact same structure for all projects of the European Union? Because that's exactly the same thing at another scale. So I went to DigiRegio and we produced 4 case studies of tests, and then they scaled it up to 30 case studies. So DigiRegio is now telling the stories of the best project of Europe in the form of a short 3-minute video. And finally, most newspaper articles you could read are built around the same structure. They start with a problem, then they get you some sort of ideas of what will happen, and you will dig into the details after you started to read it. So we're going to use what we call a 6-step story. As I said, if you understand that, this webinar will be recorded, but I also have a longer video about that. You can tell any story to anyone in less than 3 minutes, and that person will still understand you. which is amazing. And it starts with a problem and never with who you are. Who you are is called a brand. So for instance, if I read your website, or any website of the macro region strategy, or any website of project in general, the first thing I see is that we are called whatever, or we are the action group, whatever. We are EUSALP, the EU strategy for the Alpine region. So you start with saying who you are, which is a little bit like if I'm stepping into a room and start saying like, hey, look at me, my name is Charlie. I'm interesting because my name is Charlie. No one will trust me. But when you communicate in terms of organization, this is the main mistake you do all the time, is before helping anyone, you start by saying, hey, look at me. And this is a lack of confidence. It's normal. Most people who do not professionally work in this field would start like that. But that's the worst way of introducing yourself. So we're going to see. There are 6 steps. The first step is to find the problem you are solving. The second step is to make it specific for people to actually understand that problem at their level. The third step only is introducing the solution you've been developing in that project so that people understand what is the big solution. Was it a bridge? Was it a series of workshops? Was it a website, a new website? Was it a reform of the administration process? Whatever it is, it's a big stuff. So big stuff is a solution. There are not that many solutions in the world, probably 30 max. Then how that solution works. So in that case, we start to dig into the specifics of that solution. I will cover afterwards the proof and the brand. Let me tell you a quick story. So 2 years ago, I was invited by EUSAIR to assist to a great conference on journalists and media. How can we convince journalists? So the whole conference went super well. And afterwards, we were invited to see one project that was led by a scientist in the Adriatic. And the conference starts, and this guy explained what he's been doing and working on for the last 3 years. And he's been working on beacons, so sort of big sensors they put on the sea so that they can measure a lot of parameters, like the wind, the pollution of the sea, a lot of different parameters. And they had produced probably 150 beacons. And that was a massive project. And the guy talks and talks and talks and talks. And after 20 minutes, basically, I look around me and everyone wants to die. Everyone wants to escape, take coffee, or even inject some coffee in your vein, or escape the room. And the guy continues digging into the way his beacons work. At the very end of his speech, he starts one sentence. He says like, thanks to these beacons, thanks to these sensors on the sea, if there is an oil spill, there is a boat that spills oil in this part of the sea, we can know in advance where that particular oil will be, so we can protect the shore 40 minutes in advance, and we can avoid a big oil spill on the shore. Or if someone falls from a boat, we know exactly where this guy is going to be in 15 minutes. And it's so important because this sea is very moving all the time. And if we don't have this data, then people die. And I'm thinking like, why the fuck didn't you start with that, man? Why didn't you start with the problem? If you had started with that, everyone would have wanted to know what is your solution and would have thought, that is a brilliant solution. You managed to map the data of all this sea in real time. I would have been 100% with him. This is a massive problem all of you have, mostly in projects. You don't start with what you're doing. I'm going to show you a case study. I'm going to pick that one there. Okay. Sometimes you have very, very complex projects, and I understand that. And this very complex project, they are difficult to tell in a simple way because naturally, structurally very big. So I'm just focusing on screen right now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go through all the different steps I've described before on this particular case study. And you will see it's technical, it's complex. They made a massive project in the entire Baltic region that wasn't supported by the Baltic macro region, while it should actually, because it's a very good thing to do. But you will see a little bit. It's a bank that is that wanted to show to its consumer of banking service that they had an impact, a carbon impact in the region, and that they could actually change that. So they made a huge campaign, and after this campaign was over, they made this case study so we understand it.
Have you ever thought about the true cost of your last purchase? The price you actually paid is only the tip of an iceberg. The real impact of our spending behavior has yet to be calculated until now. As a bank, we analyze large amounts of financial data to identify risks. And as a company based on an island in one of the world's most polluted seas, the problem is enormous. That's why we launched the Baltic Sea Project and the Åland Index to provide funding, understanding, and to engage all clients as agents for change. By combining financial risk analysis data, merchant category codes, and carbon pricing set by the World Bank, the index calculates the environmental impact of every transaction. The bank presents a monthly impact report of your credit card purchases and the opportunity to compensate for the true cost of your consumption. The initiative was launched to position the bank using PR, digital, direct, and social media channels to activate and engage both clients, the public, and the competition. But the most effective medium is a credit card bio source that serves as a daily reminder of the need for change. With this initiative, the bank has turned all client tools for consumption into an instrument for nature. Within the last year, the bank has been invited multiple times to the United Nations conferences on climate change, generated 380,000 euros in funding, reached 315 million people, and increased brand awareness by 308%. In the first quarter, we've computed 2.5 million transactions. But true change is created together, and the index is offered as an open innovation to all other banks and their clients. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
So this story works in less than 3 minutes. It's a complex case study. It's called a data-driven case study. You usually have 3 types of case studies. The classic ones, they tend to use a voiceover. The emotional type of case study, I'm not going to show one here because it's probably the less directly the one you will do. And you have data-driven, very interesting for specialists. All people will not be interested by the fact that a bank managed to accumulate so much data on carbon and manage to give that report to people. But it is extremely interesting for you as type of case studies because you have a lot of projects which talk to other experts or which talk to politicians who need to have hardcore analysis of what works or not in their regions. So what I mean by that, that's a video. But the storytelling structure is the same for whatever products you do. And that is the most important message. And this is where I want to change the way you communicate at EUSALP level, but also for all macro region strategies, is that you do a fundamentally great job, but you don't talk about it correctly. So now we will adopt these sort of tools. So what do we need to make this sort of videos so that you know a little bit more? Lots of pictures and videos and any visuals. The one you've seen from the bank actually is partly in animation. It doesn't matter if you need to use animation. Animation, you use that when you can't find pictures or videos. So most often what I ask to all people who need to make a case study is to start collecting whatever picture, whatever video, even from your smartphone, of every single stuff you find, so that by the end of the project, we have an amazing repository of visuals. We need lots of proofs, articles, number, testimonials, people who've been showing that it worked. So in the case of the models, for instance, the scale models, that could be hearing what kids have been saying, taking notes at the end, like, what do you think? Do you understand that? Oh, yeah, I love it. Kilian, 6 years old, managed to understand how rock are falling thanks to our model. Teachers are really impressed. All these things are proof that your project is making an impact. And most often, you also have endorsements from your own regions. The president of the region wanted a model for exposing in the town hall because he found it was super useful. Or other institutions wanted to copy it, whatever. Any proof that it's great. And it all starts with the very clear problem you are solving. In the case of the scale model, you're not solving climate change. You are solving the fact that kids don't understand that there are risks and could eventually carry that idea forward to their parents via being trained, understood, raised awareness, carry that story, and their parents support also the policy afterwards. But you are specific in the problem you are actually addressing. Most people get a little bit crazy by the problem and can't solve anything. So you can't solve climate change. No one can on the planet, otherwise we would have done it already. But we can save and very small things at a specific scale, focus really well on that. And because we do an amazing job of attracting a lot of students at our particular event and then carry the message forward, on the long run, we are actually solving climate change. But we start with what we can have influence on. For the people who can help us do that work, there are lots of pictures, videos, visuals. Usually the project leader has the capacity of generating these assets a lot. And you can come to him, say like, please, every time you do something, record a video. Even if it's with your crappy smartphone, I'm good with that, as long as I have images. Lots of proofs, article numbers. Usually it's a program manager if you're in an Interact context, or that would be the action groups in your case that can dig into the transformation, the things that show it worked. Even if we managed to organize 5 meetings with stakeholders that never happened before, that's a proof it worked. And the very clear problem we are solving, I want EUSALP, I want AG1 group, I want people who are involved in communication to be sure before anything else that they understand what is the problem. So they will dig with the project leader and the program manager up until they understand the problem. If they can't understand it, then there's no communication, because otherwise it's vague and that won't work. So that's the first job, understand what it is exactly. I did that work with DG Regio. I had to understand very much who was the most interested by the case studies as well. Each program of DG Regio is managed by a country or region, you know that, and you have hundreds of projects for Interregs or FEDER or any sort of funds, that each of them have a number of customers. The yellow little guys at the bottom are the customers of the project. But storytellers are people who talk about the project level, not the program level. We don't care that Poland is managing its funds thanks to an administration which is crazy good and blah, blah, blah. No one cares, but they want to know the project. So if we talk well about the project levels, we will interest other storytellers, we will interest other journalists, we will interest politicians. And you have to know that politicians are also storytellers. They are carrying stories. Once they hear about a project, they probably will tell the same story 10 times to all their friends and colleagues. So we want to be one of these stories in their head. Well, that's pretty much it. I'm finishing on the main problem you might face when you want to build any sort of case study, when you want to build any sort of storytelling structure. Most often, I said it before, that's the main problem. Instead of starting with the problem, you start with a solution. So you bore every people out before they even understand what you're doing. That's what we do a lot. This is why, by the way, some of your partners in life don't understand what you do. It's because you didn't tell them the problem you were actually solving. The second thing is that you don't have anything to send to visualize the project. Usually it's because you've been working on that project for 2 or 3 years and you forgot. And so by the end of it, when you need to show something, you just don't have anything. That's a big problem, to be honest, because the only solution in that case is to produce a video animation that is much more costly. And that's okay, but usually I won't recommend it because you can feed in the entire life of the project some visuals. You put them on a hard drive, you save them on your email, whatever, but you keep them for the next 2 years. And finally, a lot of people do not have proof because they do not measure anything. And so they don't have results. And since they don't have any results, measurement, they can say, we were expecting 200 people to our event. We got 300 people, which means we have 50% more people than we were expecting. That's a massive success. But if you don't expect anything and you don't measure anything, well, you can't measure success, obviously, which is kind of funny. And I will finish with that. I always work with people who have at least a master's degree most of the time. Some of them have a PhD. But when they start a project, they don't put any measurement KPIs, key performance indicators. They don't measure anything. And by the end of it, they expect that suddenly they can discover success or not. So don't be afraid. Even if you discover you're not successful, but it's not working, at least you will have something to change afterwards. Not measuring is, I will finish with the camera on, not measuring is the worst thing you can do in your life because you will always feel lost since you don't know where you're going. So the main problems, we know them. And the communication will focus on producing these 4 tools, using a storytelling structure all the time, if we can, video case stories on the biggest project we have, which would be called flagship projects. They will also have their own webpage, because this is, you remember, the entry point to the website is going to be through these pages a lot. We want to increase that traffic. We want people to see that EUSALP is doing amazing changes in the regions. And finally, the newsletter, which is one of the channels, will carry forward these stories. So all the people who are already receiving our newsletters will receive all these tools we are building.
So I'm coming back to you. Thanks to Charlie, who explained everything about our strategy, about the work we have done to improve our understanding of what we should communicate and to whom we should communicate. But I would like to say something just to conclude this session about how to manage this complexity, because as you have seen, we are lots of people. EUSALP community is rich of different stakeholders with different roles. So I would like to say something about how to manage the different roles and responsibilities. As you know, communication staff is a coordination point. We are a sort of focal point, and we discuss with all the stakeholders involved in the strategy. Our main reference point are editors, so people who should talk with us within the specific AGs, but we also talk to other actors with the annual presidency, with the General Assembly, with the leaders, with the AG members. So we have plenty of people we have to coordinate in order to give a communication, in order to create a communication network. But which could be the role of these actors in making and in managing a communication? When we talk about the strategy, so what we have talked until now, I think that it's up to the communication staff together with the European Commission and the Executive Board to define the main content of the strategy and update the strategy, while it's up to the editors and the specific people working daily on the specific problem to give inputs to change or to implement the strategy. Concerning the contents and the communication contents, this is a crucial point in my opinion, because it's normal that you have the contents, you have the control of the contents, and you are the people who produce most of the contents. As communication staff, is our responsibility to collect all these contents and try to translate them in different communication tools. Now we have to say that our communication tools are quite limited. We produce a newsletter, we produce press releases, we update the EUSALP website, but now together with EUSALP and in cooperation with EUSALP, we are trying to make a step forward in terms of communication tools, and we are going to produce new digital tools such as videos, storytellings and graphics. So we are our role will be, and the EUSALP role will be to identify and to produce new products in order to make the communication more suitable with the needs and the important input Charlie Lee gave us today. Concerning social media, this is the easiest thing somehow, because communication staff is the social media manager, so we have a control of the main social media. We have a big job to do on that. We are we know that, but we need to cooperate with all the social media team that are present in each administration and in each action group. But the easiest thing, because we can control the main tools, so for us it's easier to produce contents and to produce in a way that can be understood for everybody. Just one thing I would like to say in order to improve the cooperation among the role of the communication staff and the role of the presidency. We had a good cooperation experience with the Tyrolean presidency, and now we have starting a good cooperation with the Italian team. It's important for us to understand which is the different role among the EUSALP communication staff and the communication staff which is now active in the Italian presidency. The Italian presidency will be responsible, of course, of the general coordination of the events and presidency calendar. It's up to the presidency to manage the specific presidency site. I invite you to see the site, which is now in Italian, but which will be translated in English too. The presidency will have its own press office and media relation manager, and the presidency will have the responsibility of create contents also for us in order to select the contents which could be useful also for the EUSALP website. On the other hand, the EUSALP communication staff will be the main responsible of the management of the institutional EUSALP website, but at the same time, we need a daily coordination in order to share contents with the presidency website and also for preparing joint press releases and newsletter. So we are really happy to start a good cooperation with the Italian presidency and to talk daily as we have done with the Tyrolean presidency in order to make the communication more fruitful for both of us. I remember that there is also a technical staff which is responsible for all the technical issues. So if you need to open a new page on the EUSALP website, if you need to change something in the home page, if there are something you think is not correct from a technical point of view, there is a specific team that can help us, and so for technical issues we have person dedicated to that. A last thing I would like to say is concerning the targets. Charlie explained us that we have 10 main targets. Of course, the communication staff is not able to reach all these targets on his own and quite easily. There are some targets we can work on, of course, European Commission, regional authorities, action group, maybe future project leaders. These are some targets we can control, and we'll do our best to reach these kind of targets. There are other targets that we cannot reach. So without a strong cooperation among action group, among all the actors which are working daily on the project, it will be difficult to reach the target Charlie was talking about. I don't know if Charlie agree with me, but when we talk about reporting, when we talk about spreading newsletters, spreading news which are on the EUSALP website, I think he wants to say that we need that inside each action group there will be someone, maybe you can call editor, you can call in another way, but someone who can talk with us and help us in understanding which are the key stakeholders we need to reach. So I think this is what I wanted to say, but in any case, the communication staff is here. You have all the contacts, so please call us wherever you want, and we are at your disposal to make the target Charlie gave us.
I will basically confirm what you just said. Communication is a work of a multitude. Obviously, you in any company you have the level where you can make big messages at the size of the company. So that's where, when it comes from your annual forum, for instance, that would be the big boss of the company trying to talk to each other and talking to the rest of the world. The annual forum is a great channel of communication to attract big journalists, for instance. You remember when the Austrian took the presidency, they had their prime minister and their president at the same time in the annual forum, which is kind of amazing to me. Yes, it's a smaller country than France, but I won't see Emmanuel Macron coming to, I don't know, maybe, but to the annual forum when it's going to France on its side. So you have big events, and then you have daily communication. And I think daily communication, all the targets you've mentioned that were blue, if I remember correctly, needs to be always worked on at the closest level possible. So each time you're meeting someone who's an expert or someone connected to your topic as an AG, you have to invite him to the event. You have to connect with him. You have to propose him to get a newsletter. All this work is actually what makes a company work. It's because all the employees also want to share their work with a maximum number of people, and each action group, each national authority, each regional authority, each level of the food chain have better contact with certain people. You have to remember one thing as well. You're doing great. You have a very small budget. You're doing great. I mean, you have to understand that your budget is kind of disproportionately small compared to the number of tasks you have. So just for that, I'd like to congratulate all of you to already do something. And secondly, to be as performant as you are, because you've seen you're the youngest of the macro region, and you're probably the one most performing already. With Adriatic, you're fighting. But you're doing a great job, which means people believe in that, believe in the project, do the work. Now we just needed to restructure a little bit that thing so people don't get scared by the volume of things to do. Now we have concrete tools, concrete audiences, concrete processes. This is why I will also be in Milan soon for the presidency of Italy, and we'll work 2 or 3 days on the side with Annalisa, so we can develop certain tools as well. And I think you're doing great, as I said, so keep up the good work. I'll finish there myself.